Okay, let us first highlight the keywords with respect to this, right? What are the proper keywords over here? See. The judicial legislation is antithetical to the doctrine of separation of power. And how do you justify the large number of PIL for issuing the guidelines to the executive? Okay, 20 markers, we have two parts of the question, right? We have a clear-cut two parts of the question. The first itself is saying that the judicial legislation is antithetical to the doctrine of separation of power. So what should be in our introduction? Most of you have written, right? In our introduction, we will be talking about the doctrine of separation of power. And some of you have said that we will talk about what is judicial legislation, right? You ask my opinion is that let us first mention what is doctrine of separation of power. What is the doctrine of separation of power? Article 50 of the Indian Constitution. As per the Article 50 of the Indian Constitution, the judiciary, executive and legislature must be separated from each other. But in case of India, they are not truly separated. How? The legislative and executive have overlapping functions with each other. Simple. But with respect to judiciary, it is totally independent from the executive and legislature. Understood? There it comes the judicial legislation. However, the judicial legislation which implies or which means that judiciary making the law is important definition. Or you can directly start with that. You can directly also start from judicial legislation itself. Judicial legislation, what does it mean? Judicial legislation which implies that judiciary making the law where the law is absent, or modifying the law where the law is present. That is your judicial legislation. Which moves against the doctrine of separation of power as mentioned in Article 50 of the Indian Constitution. Simple definition. How then you come over here that what exactly is the judicial legislation that is affecting? See, when I say judicial legislation, it has certain points. Judicial legislation, when it is positive in nature, it is called judicial activism. Where judiciary actually helps proactively brings up law that brings social changes or that helps to redress the problems of the society. And judicial overreach happens when judiciary goes beyond the legislation and makes law which actually impacts the people. Understood? Understood? Next. In this case, I will give you the example of two cases.
So, Sabrimala cases?
See, Sabrimala cases is something that right now, Sabrimala cases was brought to the judiciary. It was brought to the judiciary. In Sabrimala case, what happened was that the judiciary was actually deciding which fundamental right is superior to which fundamental right. Judiciary decided whether Article 25 and 26 is superior. Whether Article 25 or 26, or to say specifically whether Article 26. What is Article 26? Article 26, that is rights of the religious institutions. Rights of the religious institutions. How the rights of the religious institutions are more important when compared to individual personal rights. Personal rights availed in Article 14, Article 15, Article 6, Article 14 and 15, Article 19, again Article 25. 14, 15, 19, 25 versus Article 26. So it says that all other articles are more important than Article 26. If the people wants to worship, they can worship within their particular age, within that age, and that those who do not want to, and that you cannot prevent. So that is not the case of judicial activism. I tell you what's the case of judicial. Judicial activism takes place when the court has taken up the case through the PIL, and then the court has brought in the law. In certain cases, what happens is that the judicial activism is necessary. Where is the judicial activism necessary? Judicial activism is necessary. For example, it was in the Husainara Khatun versus Hussainara Khatun case. In the Hussainara Khatun case, what happened is that judiciary took up the cause and 40,000 under trial prisoners were released. Understood? Similarly, it was in the case of Vishaka guidelines, right? But over here is that we will be discussing in the PIL cases. But it says the judicial legislation is antithetical to the doctrine of separation of power. How? You have to mention in proper points. Number one, how is the judicial legislation antithetical to the doctrine of separation of power? How? Number one, and the most important one, violates Article 50 of the Indian Constitution. It violates Article 50 of the Indian Constitution. What else? What else beyond violation of the Article 50? What else other than violation of the Article 50 of the Indian Constitution? Think of it, if the judiciary is functioning the role of the legislative, it's not just violating the Article 50 of the Indian Constitution, but it has an overreaching impact. How? Effectiveness of the legislation is reduced. Effectiveness of the legislation is reduced. Number three is that when judiciary is making the law, when judiciary is basically making the law, what problem else is there is that the law is sometimes not very detailed. The law, there is absence of details in the law that has been formulated. As a result of which, the executive lacks clarity to take up the order. Understood? Lack of clarity amongst the executive to take up the order. What else?
Judiciary already have a lot of cases, so if we can make...
That will come to the PIL. That is in the PIL. The examiner over here is very smart. The examiner over here is very smart. He has given you two questions in such a way that you have to formulate the answer, and that that is a very clear chance that the points which you have written for the part 1 will be repeated in the part 2. Right or wrong? So you need to be very focused on this. Rise in the number of cases is okay, but what about PIL? Also rise in number of cases, sir. If you are going to write a point over there, you have to deduct a point over here. Be proper and be specific. It's just saying judicial legislation. See, judicial legislation, number one is that it prevents, that is, it's in violation of Article 50 of the Indian Constitution. Number two, what was number 2 point? Effectiveness of the legislation is reduced. Number 3 is that the absence of clarity over the judicial law. As a result, then it becomes a very much a hectic task for the executive to implement those guidelines. What else is the problem?
It may not be citizen-centric. It may not be citizen-centric.
It may not be citizen-centric is an important point that I read in it. Very good. I thought you are not seeing the point. I was waiting for you. It might not be citizen-centric. What else?
The judicial overreach may...
Another problem with the judicial legislation over here remains is that it comes in conflict with other laws. It comes in conflict with other laws.
So against the basic value of democracy.
Yes, it's against the basic value of the democracy. That's the first and foremost point. The democracy, in a democracy, there must be separation of all these three organs. That it can, see, this point you can write, you cannot write, but I would say if this point you write it in the beginning itself. While I said that it violates the Article 50 of the Indian Constitution, the very value.
So I am telling that in a democracy the peoples are the lawmakers. And in our country it is indirect democracy, so we appoint someone representative as representative. So it is the duty of our representative to make laws. If someone else who is not the representative of peoples making laws, then it goes against the basic values of the democracy. So we cannot say that our country is democratic.
Participation of citizens.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Judicial legislation, right? One of the major problems of the judicial legislation that it does not take into the law that is in existence. It frames law over the law that is in existence. That is the very reason that it comes in conflict with other laws. So I think we have 4 points with respect to this. We got 4 points. What else will be the point? What else will be the point? What else?
Last point that it depends laws over existing laws.
Last point was the description of the last one. That was not the last one. What else? How many points did we write? 4 points, right? What else? What else can be the point? Please think. This is a 10 markers question. 5 points will not be suffice. Think of it in such a manner. See, when judiciary is framing the law, it is taking the work of the executive, right? It's taking the work of the executive. Laws are not in details. Law comes in conflict with other laws. Difficulty in execution of the law. What else? It is against the separation of the power. Article 50. What else? Absence of
Depends on the law.
Yes, sir.
absence of difference in the law. Yes, that means that the law is
Actually covers the matter exclusively.
exclusively. 5 points we wrote. What more points can we write?
Needs to conflict with the executives.
Conflict, right? This is, see, it is already in conflict with the executive power, right? Judicial legislation comes in conflict with the executive power. That is one of the things. But what else?
And it itself goes against its basic values. The judiciary is not made for the legislative council.
See, what will happen is that when the judicial legislation is taking place, when the judicial legislation is basically taking place, it might impact a proper group and it might be in disadvantage for another group. It might be in advantage for a proper group and it might be in advantage for another group. For example, the judiciary said that in Jalandhar, let us close all the leather factories. Punjab High Court said, we will close all the leather factories in Jalandhar because they were polluted. Now when the leather factory is closing down, whom will it impact? Will it just impact the industry owner? No, it will also impact the proper laborers who are working over there. It will also impact the retail businesses over there. Industry is supplying to a particular retail business, right? So will it not impact the retail business over there?
So local economy also will be
Judicial legislation, see, my point is that the judicial legislation does not takes into account the impact of the legislation on the overall society. Think of it. It benefits a particular section, but it will not benefit other sections. But what does the executive does is that when the executive makes a law, it is very much careful that if it is benefiting the one part of the society, it should not be in demerit for the other part of the society. Certain schemes should be brought up. For example, let us say in Bihar, they said that let us close down all the foreign liquor shops. So when the foreign liquor shops need drink those liquor is available, right? When the foreign liquor shops were closed down, so what happened was that the government said that okay, let us provide them with alternative business. Let us help them set up milk shops. Okay, but the government had set provision. Though they will not be incoming the money, but government said let us have milk shops for them. Let us help them establishing certain kind of business. Now that is the wholesome thing for a legislation, because that's the wholesome thing for a executive. Because when executive makes a law, he looks at, because executive has the power of finance right now. Executive has the power of finance, but that is not with the help of judiciary. Judiciary will say do this, do that. Executive will be terrified that where I am going to get the money to do this. I do not have money in my financial head to execute this. Right? What was the point that I said?
Judicial legislation only benefits one part of society.
No. I did not say that. I said that judicial legislation do not benefit all parts of the society. Never write judicial does not benefit all part of the society. That must be the sentence. Your sentence should not be one part of the society, not other. Understood? Another thing is that the financial implications involved in the execution of the judicial legislation becomes difficult for the executive to execute. Understood? It becomes very difficult for the executive to execute. For example, what happened was that the court ordered that since there is a drink and driving cases, so what will happen is that since drinking and driving is continuous over here, so let us what we will do is that we will shift all the liquor shops from the highway 500 meters into the suburbs. All liquor shops will not be on the highway, but they will be in 500 meter distance. Okay. So again, what happens was that there was a financial implication imposed upon the people. And sometimes even judicial do not have the finance to, sometimes the executive do not have the finance to implement the judicial legislations. So we can all, how do we frame the statement? Simple. Lack of financial resources to execute judicial legislations. Think of it. Lack of financial resource to execute judicial legislations. Understood? Hey, this all 6 points will give you a proper look. Think of it. How we brought from the law, we came into finance. From the society point of view, it will not benefit all. From the judicial point of view, from the constitutional point of view. From the constitutional point of view, it does not respect the separation of power. From the society point of view, it will not benefit all sections of the society. Then from the law point of view, it comes in conflict with the other laws. Next is that the law is not in details, thus it becomes difficult for the executive to implement those laws. Last but not the least, lack of financial resources to implement the judicial legislations. This is a clear picture of what is the demerit of a judicial legislation. Now we will come over here that PIL, what is PIL and PIL, what is the benefit? Understood this question? Please, the second part of the question is that how do you justify the large number of PIL? Again, it is your personal opinion based question. How do you justify a large number of PIL for issuing the guidelines of executive? See, what is the PIL? First of all, what is PIL? PIL meaning public interest litigation. Public interest litigation. Public interest litigation is nothing but litigation filed in the courts for public interest or in public interest. Simple. From the PIL itself, we got the definition. Public interest litigation is nothing but the litigation filed in the court of law on behalf of the public interest. What can be the public interest? Pollution, lack of law, this that. So PIL, is it bad or is it good? Over here the statement is that how do you justify PIL? On the first part of the question, you have said that the judicial legislation, how it is unjustified, how it becomes a problem. But when we are saying judicial legislation, we basically pointed out that it is not judicial legislation, but we are talking about judicial overreach. Not all judicial legislations are bad. Some judicial legislations were very good and were the most important judicial legislations. So with respect to PIL, also same, how PIL is good and how PIL is bad. What are the pros of PIL? Please. What are the pros of PIL?
It focuses on emerging issues and
very good. It focuses upon the emerging issues like,
for example, pollution.
Okay, done. It focuses upon the emerging issues, right? First is that it provides mass justice. It provides mass justice. PIL has been providing mass justice. How mass justice? For example, in the Husainara Khatun case, what happened is that government, the Supreme Court took, it was a PIL. In the Husainara Khatun case, it was a PIL filed in front of the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court took the cognizance that 40,000 prisoners were under trial. What does under trial means? Proceedings हुई ही नहीं है. इसी तरीके से means they have already spent more time in the jail than they should have spent, and it did led to release of 40,000 prisoners. Did it impact any form of society? No, it did not impact. But those who had already spent, justice was delivered to them. Under trial prisoners should be given justice. This is the form of mass justice that is done. PIL has become an important element in the women's empowerment. How? Which case? I discussed right now just the Vishaka case. In the Vishaka guidelines, the Supreme Court came out specifically with respect to the sexual harassment in the workplace.
Said it can be acted as a mouth of depressed class who cannot work law.
Yes, it can be. It can be. Another was with respect to that, in maintenance of the public hygiene, environmental progression. What was in the case of the Murali Dogra case? In the Murali Dogra case, what happened is the Supreme Court said that they were banning tobacco or the cigarette use in the public. Important. It was the Murali Dogra case. Also, Murli S. Dogra case. Murli S. Dogra case. Supreme Court banned the use of So what else is that? It's that it fills up the vacuum in the law, provides a proactive justice. Understood? It fills up the vacuum in the law. What is a proactive justice? Justice and proactive justice. Maneko.
Justice means to give what he deserves, and proactive justice means to give him that justice before he deserves.
Okay. Proactive justice, I would say that the justice which is delivered in a very fast forward and in a very rightful manner. That is what I would call as the proactive justice. So what happens is that, for example, in the Vishaka guidelines, there was a lack of law over there.
Yes, sir.
Supreme Court filled that vacuum. Understood? What else? PIL has become an important tool. Has become an important tool for the utilization of judicial review.
Yes, sir.
PIL is an important tool for the utilization of judicial review. Understood? PIL also increases the public participation, doesn't it? PIL is nothing but the increasing of the public participation in the judicial processes. Right or wrong?
Yes, sir.
How? Which one?
सर जो आपने मुझे आंसर लिखने ବେଳେ इंट्रोडक्शन तो ଗୋଟେ सेंटेंस ଟେ ଲେଖାବ ଯେତେବେଳେ ଏମିତି ଗୋଟେ क्वेश्चन ଆସିଲା PIL ଆମେ ସର୍ଟ ନୋଟ ଯେମିତି ହ୍ୟାଣ୍ଡି ସର୍ଟ ନୋଟ ଯେମିତି ବନଉଛୁ ସେମିତି ହିଁ ଲେଖାବ ଆନ୍ସର କରିବ ତା ସେଣ୍ଟେନ୍ସ ପୁରା କମ୍ପ୍ଲିଟ୍ କରିବ
Full sentence. Anti-notes will not do. Anti-notes will not do. You have to write it full. If you are writing this, I just see. My intention was that I wanted. So, we'll be conducting the test series and all. But the thing is that I want you to. Upon structure, but a question when the question has been asked, structure कैसे बनाना है? That's the important thing. How should be the structure of the answer? For here you got two things. First you got with respect to that what was judicial legislation. How is it antithetical to the separation of power, and why it is antithetical to the separation of power. Now that will give you the marks. I'm dictating in sentence. You can while I'm dictating the sentence, you can write down the sentences. No problem with that. Next comes that again over here we have to write in full sentences. We cannot just write the points and then marks will be awarded. We have to write in full sentences. What I'm saying is the full sentence, nothing more than that. Right? Have you submitted your answers? Good. I'll check. Please.
Very recently what the government has done.
Okay.
EPA is on the line.
Okay. We are coming to it.
Sir,
Again, then what are the
So it acts as a check against the legislative arbitrariness.
Yes, it acts against the check as in legislative arbitrariness. It's a good point that we can make. It acts against the arbitrariness of the legislative action, right? What are the weaknesses of the PIL? Weaknesses of the PIL. Weaknesses of the PIL, or what are the drawbacks of the PIL? What are the drawbacks? Number one, like you said,
The excessive amount of the PIL may increase the judiciary presence of the Supreme Court argument.
PIL increases the number of cases prevailing in the judicial. But that is not the thing. What exactly PIL is happening is that the frivolous PILs means PILs which are fake in nature. They're actually what is happening is that they are increasing the judicial legislations. Judicial cases, sorry. They are increasing the number of cases in the judicial. Frivolous cases, number one. Number two, PIL again gives rise to the problems of competing rights. What are the problems of competing rights? For example, again I said in the Jalandhar case, in the Jalandhar leather tannery case, what happened was that the Punjab High Court said close down all the competing rights. Means it comes with respect to the rights of the laborer who are working, comes with rights of the market which is done. So please mention the term competing rights. It gives rise to the problem of competing rights. It gives rise to the problem of competing rights. What are competing rights? For example, in the Jalan, do you want to write a statement? Should I dictate it? It gives rise to the problem of competing rights. For instance, or for example, the Jalandhar High Court ordered shutting down of all tanneries. Jalandhar High Court, sorry, the Punjab High Court. Punjab and Haryana High Court, the Punjab and Haryana High Court has ordered the shutting down of all the tanneries in Jalandhar. It will not just impact the laborers working in the tanneries, it will not just impact the laborers working on the tanneries, but will adversely impact the retail businesses, small retail businesses, but will adversely impact the small retail businesses, but will adversely impact the small retail businesses. One of the points that we missed in the PIL benefits was that how the PIL was beneficial to the poor people, to the poor masses. Delivering justice to the poor was one of the tools of the PIL. One of the importance of the PIL was that it is a delivery, it's a justice delivery tool, especially for the poor people who cannot afford lawyers to have their justice. Who cannot afford the court process, right? Good. Have you added that point? Sorry, I'm just no problem with that. Have you added the point? Next, what else?
Sir, if you can enhance the
Debates.
say and you can enhance the feeling of secularism or regionalism among certain groups.
Yes, it can be done. But what I'm right now, let me come to that point. We cannot write that point. But how can we modify that point? See, PIL right now, what is happening is that the PIL when it started in 1980s by Justice Iyer, that time the PIL came into light because it became a tool to deliver justice to the poor. Right now, it's not anymore delivering justice to which it is though delivering justice to the poor, but now more number of PILs are filed by politicians,
Yes.
by political parties, politicians, corporate sectors, where there is personal gain rather than the public gain. Understood? PILs, with this point we can write that the PILs are more PILs today are more for the corporate, personal and political gains. With this first point we wrote is that though PILs are increasing, we have read the number of PILs being filed. Some of the fake PILs, or I call it the frivolous PILs, increase in the number of cases. But there is another point that is very, very important is that with respect to the PILs, that the delay in delivering justice to the PILs, or I would say delay in the disposal of the PIL cases. Delay in the disposal of the PIL cases, right? What is the way forward? What should be the way forward? Write down way forward. I want you to write way forward. अच्छा way forward लिखते हैं ताकि box कर देते हैं कि underline करो way forward. What should be the way forward with respect to PIL?
Negative can be, sir. Say sometimes distract the judiciary from the real problem that the society is facing.
Yes, that is happening when there are cases, number of cases are increasing, and that is happening when there is inordinate delay in the disposal of the PIL. So some PIL are genuine and some PIL are frivolous. We have to be way forward. I'm talking about in the way forward. We'll be talking about in the way forward. What we can do is that we can organize a judicial committee. A judicial committee to analyze which PIL should be entertained and which PIL should be disposed of.
On which basis?
Way forward. Organization of a judicial committee. Organization of a judicial committee to analyze the PIL. Which are legitimate, or to analyze legitimate PILs.
Which are legitimate?
Which are legitimate PILs, or PILs which are legitimate.
Recent development are like recent development.
Oh, wait, let me finish then. Penalty should be imposed on frivolous PILs. Important. Penalty should be imposed on those filing frivolous PILs. Penalty should be imposed on those filing frivolous PILs. What else can be the way forward?
Certain section of society educated हो prominent expert हो ସେମାନେ only PIL file କରିପାରିବେ अगर recent development है.
See, the reason, okay, that you are saying that a certain section of the society can file a case. I would say that there are still human rights laws, there are still honorable laws human rights lawyers who are still filing PIL for the larger public.
schedule goes against Article 14.
I am very curious. Advocate Sai Deepak is one. Sai Deepak is one such great man who is filing PIL. Still, he is filing PIL for the people who deserve their rights. He is a good person. So that we cannot change. But what should be the conclusion? See, the conclusion, my conclusion, our conclusion should be that we see, judiciary, executive and legislative are the pillar of the democracy. And they should stand distinct. Colliding with one another will automatically harm the democracy in itself. Which is my point. Judiciary, legislative, they are all the pillars of the democracy. Colliding with each other will harm the democracy. How they pillar they start colliding with each other, what will happen? The house will fall. Simple thing. Understood? Next. Done. Now let's come to the, as I had said, Hindu newspaper articles will be discussing and questions will be formed with respect to that. Done with this, right?